Hello, my name's Molly Purdue. I'm the executive director of the Alzheimer's Family Support Center. I'm also a co-founder. The Alzheimer's Family Support Center really was started because of the experience I had taking care of my mother when I had gone back to school and I was working on my PhD from Northeastern University. And as I was studying and trying to write my dissertation, it became clear that the most I would say the most interest that I seemed to show was in trying to figure out how to care for my mom while I started my family with my children. And I kept going to these dissertation meetings at Northeastern, and my chair would say, I never advise people to throw all their work out. My original work was looking at equity in sports. And she said, but you're coming into this with a counseling background. You're looking at issues. I think you really need to just start over. And it's what took a little while in starting over, probably 10 years of trying to get up to speed with all the information that was out there, and then coming up with a design to finish my original work on Cape Cod, which was looking at families dealing with Alzheimer's, and then to take that body of work that I finally finished and then move it in the direction of something concrete and pragmatic. That's what inspired the center. So in looking at what wasn't there for families like ours and what it was like to have, children on one end of the spectrum that you're trying to care for, and then having a parent on the other. And I learned a lot to be just to be pretty blunt. It was an amazing experience in a lot of ways. It was also very, very challenging. And I was shocked at what we didn't have out there in our communities to help us. And as I was looking at doing my literature review and interviewing folks and trying to figure out what are the kind of institutional supports, what are the community supports, the Alzheimer's Family Support Center kind of grew out of what I thought would be helpful, which is having a support center that didn't just look at, at that time, my mother's disability, her cognitive loss and her difficulty. It didn't just look at, what we were going through, but tried to take the lens of the family and seeing this where there are a lot of people are trying to figure out how to care for the people that they love and they want to look out for, but how do they do it? What are the best practices? How do you get support? Where are the supports? And are they readily available? Because we know that information is critical when you're trying to do something. And so that's how the very modest Alzheimer's Family Support Center got started, with a cell phone and a computer and a committee, dissertation committee that looked at what I had kind of come up with as some best practices of bringing into a more pragmatic connection in our communities. These great interventions that some of them have been around for quite a long time, but never found the legs to find their way into our neighborhoods or our healthcare organizations. So that, in a long-winded answer to your question, Eric, that's how we got started in saying we can do this better. We can find ways to connect what we know and how to help families and do it in a way that has capacity. So that's an issue that we've been working with since day one, because it's no longer just me and Vaughn Harding, who was our clinical director, and Tony Sennett, which was our phone person, Melanie Braverman, who's a co-founder that started off as a cultural director. We've grown beyond that small crew to including lots of other people in doing our work. Yeah, so one of the things we kind of pride ourselves on is trying to fill the gaps. And there's always challenges. There's challenges around long-term care supports in our community. People don't have a lot of understanding of what is taken care of, what isn't taken care of by health insurance. Long-term care planning is something we try to help people with. We early on, we trained someone to be a shine worker, which most Senior centers have someone designated as their SHINE person, which is serving the health insurance needs of the elderly. It's a person that can help you figure out how to use your health insurance, how to get your secondary coverage, how to look at mass health applications when you need it. And so we took something like that, which needs to be available. And if a person living with Alzheimer's is well progressed and their caregiver can't get out to the senior center, we have a SHINE worker that will go to them. And so that's just one way that we were able to kind of fill a gap that we were trying to fill in alternative ways in our communities. But the idea that not everyone can get out of their house whenever they want to means that sometimes you need to do in-home visits. So we were able to take a program and just alter it a little bit to have a little more flexibility for our families. And we find that that really helps them. For example, during COVID, when everything seemed to shut down, we were able to go out of our back door, go into the center, and keep everything running and figure out how to get everybody on Zoom. So, we did this really, really early on so that we could keep people connected. And it was one of the gap areas that exposed itself, during the pandemic, when we were kind of in some semblance of lockdown. We found a way to keep people connected, and we started doing emails that were daily, basically. And we've pulled back on that a little bit because people now are getting out and doing things. But we were able to keep people informed. Reach out, and our email lists have grown because of that. So yeah, we started with very modest beginnings, and we just thought, if we're here to actually be a nonprofit that's going to serve the people in our community, then let's actually do the service, and let's see what do they need and try to respond. And I would say that kind of flexibility is really important for a community organization. So we are continually trying to figure out how to reach out and get back into what we need. So, for example, we're now moving into more in person. So I'm really excited to announce that we're back in the Falmouth Senior Center. And Joanne Fishbein is our licensed social worker. She's a wonderful practitioner. She's not only doing in-person consults, but she's also running a support group. And I would say a support group that filled up almost the day after we got it all set up. I mean, there's such a need in our communities for these best practices that it does not take long for us to get people to capacity. And so we're excited about being back in Falmouth and being back in the Mashpee area. We're also doing in-person consults there and support groups there. We're planning on getting back into every community, hopefully by January. I'm hoping that the resurgence that they're seeing in Europe does not bother us, in the sense we've had very high vaccination rates. So I'm hopeful that we're not going to have community spread. But as long as we do not have some resurgence, our plan is to be back in person all across the Cape by sometime in January. Some of the things that we've lost during COVID are our day programs. And there was a very robust day program in Falmouth. Cape Cod Healthcare had day programs running in Sandwich and in Sandwich and Harwich. And there was a really very, very good social program in Bourne. And those have not yet come back, nor the town of Barnstable. So there still is a gap, and there's still a need for programming. I mean, I know the Memory Cafe is coming back on and in person, and we're going to be doing some programming at most of the museums across the Cape. We've just gotten back into the Cape Cod Museum of Art. We're planning on doing some things at the Falmouth Arts Center, as well as Preservation Hall. We're going to be doing a musical in-person program in Dennis that everyone is going to be invited to attend. So we know that the cultural piece of what we do is really important, because no one wears scarlet letters. Families and friends and people living with cognitive loss are all invited. So they just get to walk into a museum and have an experience that should be a really good experience. And we do some of that because A, it's cognitively stimulating, and B, we know we do better when we socialize. And so we like to provide those opportunities for people to be able to come together safely. We do have a policy where, everything we do is available online. And if you don't feel comfortable in person, we are going to continue with our online programming. So we're kind of doubling the amount of offerings that we've had. And so that's very exciting. So we just keep trying to build it because the need is so great. In the Cape Cod region, we're talking about anywhere from 10 to 13,000 people that are suffering from, and I wouldn't say everybody is suffering all the time, but there are people that have cognitive decline, and we're talking about 10 to 13,000. Those are usually the numbers that get bantied about based on percentage of people that become symptomatic over the age of 65. So there's quite a few people that we that are in some state of cognitive loss that could really benefit from those programs at the museum because they're stimulating, and there are also programs where we understand if someone has memory loss. So everybody wears name tags, so you're not going to be asked to do something that is going to be embarrassing because you may not be able to remember. So we keep it stimulating, but we also make it a safe and secure environment for everybody to be able to participate. So that's something that I think, more people should take us up on and try out some of those programs. They're very casual. They're really well run. Melanie Braverman is the cultural director, as I've mentioned, and now she has an assistant that's going to be traveling around the Cape, making sure we have enough programming going. It's not the same as a day program. We're hopeful that our day programs at some point are going to come back online. But until then, we're just going to keep trying to provide other opportunities. That we were the recipients of administration community living grant. And this is a very, very competitive process. And we were chosen in this round out of 10 other organizations from across the country. And that is going to allow us to have some additional funding to be able to open a secondary office. And that is going to happen in the Hyannis area, in the town of Barnstable. We're really excited about being able to have a secondary office site, and we're thinking into how we can keep it kind of functioning, with lots and lots of these programs like support groups and education, and that will be a hybrid. So we're hoping to kind of build a little studio. Probably nothing like what you guys must have on the community television, but at least, maybe we'll have to, Eric, maybe we'll have to get you in there and pick your brain to figure out how to get all the camera angles correct and really make a hybrid little studio so that when we're teaching, we're doing our educational savvy class, that if we have some people that want to attend from somewhere else while they don't feel comfortable coming into Hyannis, they're going to be able to watch. And so I want to explore this idea of hybrid programming and see if there's a way we can figure out how to do it well, because it would just make our programs more accessible to more people. And Alzheimer's, is a disease process. It's usually diagnosed by taking an image of the brain, looking at some of the cognitive losses. Dementia is more of an umbrella term. If you can imagine umbrella over all the different, I would say 150 different types of dementias. So, you've got Lewy body and vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia, all these different dementias are under that dementia umbrella. If you were to look at definitions, by definition, dementia is usually defined as having cognitive loss in 2 or more categories of thought that interfere with daily living. So usually we don't use the dementia term until someone is really starting to struggle in their everyday life. And, it's one of the complexities about these dementias, and, of which you have 150 different, I would say, patterns. If you look at Alzheimer's as a pattern, it's usually a global cognitive loss, whereas if you have something like a frontal temporal dementia, it's more in those frontal temporal regions of the brain. So there are certain patterns that get developed, knowing that what we've learned from brain banks is that most people are not a purebred. They usually have, kind of a Heinz 57 mix of dementias by the time the donation of someone's brain to the brain bank happens, and they're able to see, what was going on for the people that have generously done this donation for science. They find that it's a mix. So most people eventually will have some type of mixed dementia progression. So given all that, what's really, really important when it comes to diagnosing and is it dementia, is it Alzheimer's, is getting good, accurate medical information. And it's so common for people to be so scared and so nervous about both of those words. I don't know that dementia wins the word contest over Alzheimer's, because I think they're both really scary to people. One means you're a little crazy, and one, we look at demented and we don't have such a great connotation of that word either, but they're frightening. And so many times a person will not go and have that conversation with their medical doctor or medical provider because they are so scared that what is going to happen for them is that they are going to have, one of those diseases. So we always recommend, if you're starting to have some memory issues and you don't know what's up, go and have a confidential conversation with your medical provider. It's so important. We do memory screens and we do an early identification program that we're building right now. And when we go out in the community, we do these memory screens. The first thing we do is we just do a survey, and it's all confidential. Nobody's going to tell your medical information. But one of the things we found is that it could be something simple, like someone's not sleeping, or someone is not, has a hypothyroid condition and they're not on medication yet, or somebody is really under tremendous stress and they haven't figured out how to reduce stress. There's so many different things that can affect memory that if you're so frightened to have that conversation, you can't get help with many things that might be treatable. Our cognition is kind of like the canary in the coal mine. And there can be other reasons why we're starting to not do well remembering. And so you really want to make sure you're talking to your doctor. One thing, for example, is clinical depression. People that have a clinical depression may not remember things well. And depression is something that we know is treatable, as are some other things that could, have your memory kind of on hold. One of the first cases I encountered when we got started was someone that was exceptionally bright in so many ways, but was so frightened about having Alzheimer's that they refused to go and talk to their doctor. Well, by the time the family member got her to the hospital, she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer, and the cancer actually affected her cognition. And those are cases we don't want to hear about anymore. We want to try and be proactive about our health, and we see cognitive health in this way. We don't really know exactly what creates an Alzheimer's. We have researchers that talk about this cascade of events, about inflammation. We all know about, beta amyloid as far as a protein that's in excess in our brains, but we don't really have a definitive reason why yet. They haven't gotten there yet with the research around Alzheimer's, but many smart people are trying to figure it out. And one of the things that we know is that we also need to consider cognitive health, that lifestyle changes can have a tremendous impact on how we age and how well we do as we're aging with our cognition. So, as I mentioned, depression, so loneliness and isolation, you don't do as well cognitively. And we probably experienced some of this during the COVID pandemic, where we were so isolated, people were a little foggy. And that has been reported. And there were some statistics that were gathered through the pandemic, especially in Europe when there were, complete lockdowns, that folks did not fare so well because of the fact that they were so isolated. So there are all these factors that contribute to how well we do as we age. And the end of the spectrum is Alzheimer's, and a neurological disease that clearly impacts our cognition. But then there are other things that I think we can try and focus on, so we try to maintain our cognitive health as we age. I had a nurse tell me once that she believes about 80% of the time it could be a neurological issue like Alzheimer's or vascular dementia or something, but in 20% of cases it could be infections, it could be other organic reasons why people are having difficulty. I mean, we know that cardiovascular health is really important. If you're not getting enough oxygen, that can affect cognition. We know some of these, like I mentioned depression a couple of times. And there's this rare dementia, normal pressure hydrocephalus, and most people have never heard of it. It's relatively rare, but it's when, for some reason, the ventricles in the brain get enlarged, and some of the hallmarks are ambulation issues, incontinence, word finding, loss, and yet it's a very, very hard dementia to diagnose, because most people don't get diagnosed until they've been symptomatic for too long, and there's an actual treatment. There's a shunt that is put into the brain that drains the excess fluid. People tend to recover if it is diagnosed early, before there's too much brain loss. And yet I think the majority of people that get that diagnosis, it happens sometimes too far along, too late, because we always think worst case scenario. I have an untreatable reason for my memory loss. And I don't want to say that, like I said, 80% of the cases that may be true, but the 20% we can do something about, and we need to. And that's why that confidential conversation with your primary doctor, primary care physician, is so critical to rule other things out. And it's almost like you go down the path of getting diagnosed by omitting any other reason why that you're having some of these difficulties. And what I would say too, someone goes and they get a cognitive screen. It becomes clear they have an accelerated cognitive loss. Well, we always think in terms of, okay, we're done. Life is over. There's nothing to live for. And I don't think that's true either. There's a writer on Cape Cod, Greg O'Brien. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but he wrote a book on Pluto, Inside the Mind of Alzheimer's. And he called me right after his Alzheimer's diagnosis that happened when he was in his 50s. And he had read an article that was about the research that I was doing for my PhD program. And he wanted to talk to me because he had just received this diagnosis. And he told me he wanted to write a book. And I said, well, what are the difficulties you're having? And he mentioned that, he's having some difficulties with organization. I'm like, get yourself a really good editor and start writing, and start now. And he did. And he's done quite well. He's published his book. We just showed a documentary that a filmmaker had just made about him on our cultural day. And, he lives every day with a lot of purpose and a lot of meaning, because he feels like he wants to get the word out that he's not going easy into his diagnosis, that he's going to continue to do as much as he can for as long as he can. And he's the kind of person that when he lost the ability to drive his car, and he happens to live in Brewster and not far from where the center is on Main Street in Brewster, and I would see him riding his bike. And he's like, I can't drive, but I can still ride a bike. And that's the kind of spirit that many people start to come into a dementia diagnosis with. And I think he's a great role model in that sense of, okay, you can't do the same things you used to do. What can you do? And how do we find a way to, mitigate what our disability is and try to utilize what abilities we still have. And this is what programs like memory cafes and, we have an arts and ideas program and some of these other things, is that we have to think into how we keep meaning and we keep purpose in our lives no matter what. And just to give you another example is that we do these large educational venues where we rent out Barnstable High School where the symphony plays, and we're able to bring in and dementia train lots and lots of people. And the first year that we did this, clearly way before COVID ever reared its head, but we were able to bring 1,200 people to Barnstable High School. And we wanted to give them packets of information that had PowerPoints and ways to connect to different providers and all these things. And we thought, wow, wouldn't that be great if we had a group of people that wanted to help us stuff 1,200 folders and put this together with numerous pieces of paper, which you could think for someone that's having some cognitive loss could have some challenge, to it, but not too much challenge, enough that it was stimulating and it was enjoyable. I thought, well, let's bring everybody together. Let's put some food on the table and let's have community. Let's talk and share and laugh. And we were able to have 1,200 packets collated and put together. And then the group of people that, had varying diagnoses that worked together to get this job done, they came to the event, and we wanted to recognize them for their helpfulness. And I think we miss out on those opportunities a lot because we don't think into how do we keep everybody moving along, given the cognition that they have in that moment, and how do we keep everyone doing a little better? Because one of the things we also know about Alzheimer's is that the emotional center, if I had dementia or Alzheimer's, would I feel joy? Could I laugh? Could I love? Could I feel pain? Could I feel sadness? And the answer is yes. So we know that we can appeal to helping people feel better as they move through these progressions. And part of that is purpose and meaning. And many of these programs, that is probably, one of the things that it really tries to address, as well as community. So we have a website, alzfamilysupport.org. That's one way. We're as simple as a telephone call, 508-896-5170. And we have people that are available. You can send us an email, info@capecodalz.org. That's available. So we try to be as accessed as easily as we can. So we have people that'll answer the phone. They can set you up with support groups. We do consults. We do support groups. We have a great educational offering called the Savvy Educational Program. It is evidence-based. It has been studied and rolled out. All of Massachusetts has utilized the Savvy as one of the best educational tools for families dealing with dementia. We do these free conferences. I mean, everything that we offer out there, there's no charge for it. We're able to provide it. We want to remove the barrier of cost. Alzheimer's and dementias, they're costly. There's enough that people will pay for, and it's not going to be for us. So we try to help everyone and meet them where they're at so they can get the help that they need. So it's almost like an individualized educational plan that we'd love to be able to help families have, so they can utilize some of their own human capital. They can figure out what do we have in our own communities and what are some of the resources that you need to access to be able to do it as well as you can. So that's available by contacting us, on our website or any of the other means, email, phone calls. People wait too long, and research shows this. For whatever reason, we think my person isn't bad enough yet. They're not progressed enough yet. And the truth is, the best time to reach out is as early as possible. And the research kind of bears that out to be true. If you identify and connect early, you not only can get information that might help you now, but you're able to make a plan for what you may need later. And you're able to work on a, one of the programs that we offer are these consultations. And the consultations are based on a giant body of research out of New York University, where they've been measuring what happens if you just sit down, you get a social worker or a counselor, sits down with a family, and they talk about planning, and they talk about how's it going and what would help you. And by doing some of that, the research is really clear that people tend to do better. They have a higher quality of life. They have less depression, because caregiving can be quite complex, and it can be exhausting sometimes if you don't have the proper guidance and support. So we want to help that whole family do a little better. And these consults, these planning sessions really seem to help people, and that's available. And we're doing that now in person in Falmouth and Mashpee, and it will be happening all over the Cape as we bring it back, and it's available online.